Today we're going to do things just a little differently. I'm going to read a few verses in our chapter 10. My brother Frank here is also going to read a few verses. I'll conduct the discussion as I will lead the discussion as we have done in the past. Frank then in the second half of the class will handle the Q&A part. We're thinking that this section of Genesis is going to take a little bit more than just 45 minutes. So we may extend my time over about 10 minutes or so into the second half. We always want to allow as many questions as we can. Today, I'm going to be machine gunning you with just a lot of information. Now, one of the things that you may be asking yourself, and Rick sort of jumped on my thesis here, but you may be asking yourself, why is it important for us to go through this information and not just skip over it and just say, well, Genesis 10 has got a lot of names, and just skip over it and say it like that? And then what we've done is we've missed a lot of opportunities. Now that seems to be the way a lot of classes that I've gone to over the years, that seemed to be the modus operandi. Just go immediately from chapter 9 to chapter 11 and say, oh yeah, Genesis 10, it's nations. We don't have the time to go over it. Today we're going to go over it. We're going to go over it quickly. You'll need this sheet. You'll need pages 5, 6, 7, and 8 in your booklet. You'll also need the map. This map is designed very colorful. If you have any complaints, JD is a complaint department because he worked it out. So if this particular map, though, is to allow you to plot the information that you get in this map that is as of 2,500 years or more. So what this map does is tells you where the men who were descendants of Ham, Shem, and Japheth are believed to have settled by most Bible scholars and archaeologists in this day and time. This map is to allow you to plot where these men would be located if they lived in modern-day Germany, or if they lived in Armenia, or if they lived in Moscow, or if they lived in Saudi Arabia, or what have you. Got it? Everybody understand how that works? So this is designed as a tool for you to plot where these men would be living if they lived in the 21st century. Now there's a lot of things that I still don't know. That's an understatement, obviously. There's a lot of things that archaeologists, biblical archaeologists and biblical scholars still do not know about where these men may have settled, although more is being learned all the time. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor and keep your questions to a minimum so that we can get through this material. This class, this discussion today is not intended to rush us through anything so we can get through it. It's intended to help us all understand and appreciate what a man named Martin Luther said several hundred years ago. And I'm reading from a fellow that I've got some of his material at home, a guy by the name of James Montgomery Boyce. Some of you may recognize Dr. Boyce. He died a few years back, but he was one of the leading archaeologists, Middle Eastern archaeologists. He was a Bible scholar. He taught theology. He was a Presbyterian. Okay. So 2 out of 3 is not bad, right? Everybody has a different deal going on. But he taught for 50 some odd years in a Presbyterian church in Philadelphia, and is noted by most biblical scholars as being one of the acknowledged authorities by his peers. He had a doctorate of divinity and a doctorate of theology. So he's quoted Martin Luther. So when I read that cite that he makes about what Martin Luther said, I thought it might be appropriate for us to pay attention to it. Now this is a perfect answer to the question about why do we need to be studying chapter 10 in such detail. Boyce quotes Martin Luther as follows: "Hence one must consider this 10th chapter of Genesis a mirror in which to discern that we human beings are namely creatures so marred by sin that we have no knowledge of our own origin, not even of God himself, our Creator, unless the Word of God reveals these sparks of divine light to us from afar. This knowledge the Holy Scriptures reveal to us. Those who are without this knowledge live in error, uncertainty, and boundless ungodliness, for they have no knowledge about who they are and whence they came." I'll let that sink in for about this long. These men were just several hundred years, 500 years away from the flood, 500-600 years past the flood. So what had occurred within the discernible past from their ancestors was still in their minds. They were still involved and still wondering about a number of things that were going on, and the world was still pretty much a new place to them. So why do we study this? We study this because we want to have knowledge about who we are, and we want to know from whence we came. And if you follow the line from Seth all the way to Jesus Christ, and you see that we are spiritually inheritors of this new covenant that was formed by Jesus Christ, who is in a direct line from Seth, which you can find in your booklet. You'll notice that this is why we need to study this stuff. We need to understand who we are, and that we are the spiritual inheritors of the new Messiah, the new covenant. So let's get started with the table of nations. Now you will need this paper, which is at page 5 in your book. You will need another paper, which is, 5, 6, 7, 8 in your book, and then you'll need this map. So you'll be turning back and forth quite a bit, and I know it's a lot to ask of you, but we're all here for the same reason, so I appreciate you working with us. Frank, would you start off with Genesis 11:1, please? 11:1. Oh, wait a minute, 10:1. Thank you. Oh, I just thought I'd skip the chapter. No. I did this about 3 this morning, so I'll tell you everything you need to know.
This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood.
This verse is what we would all acknowledge as being a transition where we're going into a new area. This verse is going to start to set the stage for those men who settled the world. Those men who settled the world after the flood. Those men who were doing what they were told to do, for the most part, to be fruitful and multiply, which is what God told Noah and his sons to do, and their descendants. So this is what they're doing. Now these sons were born after the flood. God told humanity, and this indicates that they did what they were trying to do what they were told to do to a large extent. They didn't set up a tent and live in the woods and never go anywhere. They were moving because all of this land that we see, that you'll see on this map here, the majority of this land on this map was vacant property. I mean, there was nobody there in the early days. Verse 2. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, and Tubal, Mesech, and Tyrus. Also, give me some grace on these names. I left all the 8-syllable names up to Frank because I know he's got a more glib tongue than I do about 8 syllables. I was gonna ask Rick to read some of this, but I decided maybe that might get me in trouble. Might not get us anywhere. I don't know.
I can read them, but I probably would crucify the pronunciation.
Yeah, I think we all will do that. So, the sons of Japheth. Now, Japheth, by the way, if you want to look at it, page 7 in your book, this will give you who these sons are. Sons of Japheth, sons of Ham, sons of Shem. And I'll let you read the criteria that provide some evidence to the flood down underneath that. But you'll see that we're going to be starting with Japheth. The sons of Japheth again were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Mesech, and Tyrus. So let's just say this about Japheth. The other day, Bill Parr and I were chatting, and I thought I had some information that he didn't have. Mistake 1. Mistake 2 was my understanding about half as much as he did about who we were descended from. But most of us could rightly claim that we are descendants of Japheth. We are Japhethians and Gomerites and what have you.
Go on.
I want to know who said that.
I think he's ducking back there.
I'll dismiss and let JD handle it. Okay, so Japheth was the father of the Indo-European people, which means that he was the father of many of the people who settled from India to the western shore of Europe. Now, how we know this, based on the research that I've done, each of these countries, to a limited extent, but to the extent that linguists understand it to be, all are linked by similarities in their language. And so they believe that it's a pretty easy connection to make from Japheth and his descendants as to where they settled, because they have some commonalities in their linguistics, in their languages. I want to point out now that we're going to go, you might want to look at page 8 in your book, which is the page that looks like this. Now, if you can see that for you, got better eyes than I do, Brother Williams. But, okay, so, and I apologize that maybe your copy is not quite as clear as it should be. One thing I think we ought to do is we talk about page 8, the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Are you familiar with how to read a map? One way that they taught Rick in the military when he was lobbing shells here, there, and everywhere is how to read a map and how to use that map to know where his shells would hopefully land. Not always, probably, but hopefully they land. What I would recommend you do is you take this map and you divide it into quarters. Just draw a big, so you'll have 4 quarters on this map. As you look at this map, face on, the up left-hand corner or quarter is going to be the descendants of Gomer, Javan, and their Japathians. Across to the right, you're going to see other descendants of other sons. And this, down, then come straight down, and again on the right, in the bottom corner, other names. And then go across to the left, other names. So we're looking at Europe in the left-hand upper corner. We're looking at the Middle East, part of the Middle East rather, and areas of Asia, Asia Minor. And then the bottom would be Arabia, the bottom corner would be Arabia and parts of Africa. And the left-hand quarter, 4th quarter, would be parts of North Africa. So you see how that works? So when I say left-hand corner, and I ask you for descendants of Gomer and Javan, where are you going to look? Top left-hand corner, right? Okay, so let's go. What I'm going to do now is on pages 5 and 6, we're going to start going through some information about as many of these men as I thought we would have time to cover. I considered them as being pretty important. If you were compiling this list, you might add someone and take someone off. So, having said that, Gomer is, look at the verse, and you'll see verse 2, sons of Japheth were Gomer, and then the author of this verse lists those sons of Japheth. Gomer called it the north quarters in Ezekiel 38:6, which is now northern Turkey. So northern Turkey is going to be where? Probably it'll be in the upper left-hand corner of your map, right? Okay. So now that's a good example of where we're going with this. These people, these Gomerites, migrated westward to France and Spain. Some of the Gomerites migrated further to what is now called Wales. Think about these people traveling as far as the Middle East over to Wales, which is on the west side of England, as you know, about halfway up the west on the Irish Sea. So I'm going back into my geography some here. On the Irish Sea. So that gives you an idea of how far these people may have migrated. They would have needed things to help them do that, wouldn't they? Like boats, other things. But we would assume that a lot of these men would have had some boat building skills. I mean, they had a granddad or a dad that had some experience in building a boat. Okay, Magog. That will be Roman numeral 2 on page 5 of your list. Magog lived in the northern parts as described in Ezekiel 38:15 and 39:2 of Turkey. Now Josephus called them Magolites. It was one of those twisters. The Greeks called them Scythians, the region that now includes part of Romania and part of the Ukraine. So that's going to be the upper right-hand corner of your map on page 8. You can find Magog there. And by the way, this map on page 8 it may be off by 15 degrees west, 30 degrees north or whatever, but it's not going to be substantially off, but it's the best idea that the United Nations had, and these people who did this particular map had as to where this was located. It comes from the Bible History website. But you can see where, if you look at this map, you can see where Ukraine is, right? What's going on in Ukraine right now? Quite a bit. Quite a bit. Warfare. But you can see, by looking at this map, that Ukraine borders Russia and Belarus and other peoples. This map may be 2 or 3 years old. It may go back as far as the Obama administration, because you'll notice that part of the Ukraine has now been ceded to Russia. That the far right-hand part probably doesn't. Remember, that part was ceded to Russia years ago. On with my machine gunning you with facts. Madai, Roman numeral 3, another one of Japheth's sons. Along with Shem's son Elam, Madai is the ancestor of modern-day Iranians called Medes by the Greeks. Always associated with the Persians. Daniel 6:8, Daniel 6:12, Daniel 6:15. In 1935, they called their country Iran. The Medes also settled as far east as India. So once again, if you look at this map, you won't be able to go as far as, you can see India on this map towards the bottom quadrant of this map. So you can already start to see how extensive this go forth and multiply applied here. How extensive it really was. These people just didn't jump in a car and drive 3.5 hours and get to Albuquerque or whatever, wherever they were heading. No, it took them, it might have taken them hundreds of years in terms of this migration that they were all making to settle all different parts of the world. Is that right? No,
it's there.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay. Madai, that was, Mesech rather was, Madai was 3. Javan is the next one. Roman numeral 4 on your list. Javan is the Hebrew word for Greece. Daniel refers to the king of Gracia in Daniel 8:21, literally known as the king of Javan. Javan's sons were, you can read them there, they're listed in Genesis 10:4, all of whom have connections with Greece. Kittim is one that jumps out at me, and if you look at the upper right-hand quadrant, if you look at the lower right-hand quadrant, right on the line between the left hand and the right hand, lower part of this map, under the black word that says descendants of Shem, you'll see Kittim. I think that would be. Obviously, that's in the Mediterranean. Tubal, Roman numeral 5. Ezekiel mentions Tubal along with Gog and Mesach in Ezekiel 39:1. Later known as Ibers and called Iberia by the Romans, now known as Georgia, whose capital to this day bears the name Tubal as Tbilisi. So you see that a lot of these men, as they were settling various parts of the world, were naming the areas that they settled, as it says here on your page 7 in your book. The areas that they were settling, they would name after their ancestors, and sometimes they would name their gods. As to get further away from the God, they would name their gods after some of their ancestors. because that was who they considered as being a divinity, because they were back in the distant past. We would all disagree with that approach, obviously. We got Roman numeral 5. Now let's do Tyrus, which is Roman numeral
7.
Did I skip? No, Mesach, Roman numeral 6. Thank you. Roman numeral 6. This is important, I think, because as you start to study end times prophecy, you'll start to run across some of these names. And in the past, when I've studied some end times prophecy, or looked at Ezekiel, or looked in Daniel, or some other places, I'll say, wait a minute, where is that guy? Where did that name come from? I can't connect the dots on that name. Hopefully this type of information will help us all to connect some of these dots and make other studies that we are doing on our own or in other classes a little bit easier to manage and to understand where some of these people came from as they're referred to by Ezekiel or Daniel or Isaiah or somebody else's, or Revelation or Acts. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Mesach is the ancient name for Moscow. Moscow is both the capital of Russia and the region that surrounds Moscow. To this day, one section, the Meschera lowland, now carries the name of Mesach. So that's another validation of what I've just told you, that they're naming these regions after their ancestors. On many occasions. Probably none of this is absolute. Okay. Roman numeral 7 on your list is Tyrus. The descendants of Tyrus were called Thracians. The Greeks changed their name to Thracians. Thrace reached from Macedonia to Yugoslavia. The Thracians would be part of this Macedonian empire that eventually is going to lead the Alexander the Great, etc. But you can see on your map, this is the colorful map, where Greece is, and that will give you some information about where they settled. Okay, everybody doing okay? Nobody's passed out or anything like that? So, say again, Rick? Oh, I'm sorry, that was a question. All right. Let's move on to verse 3. The sons of Gomer. Now, each one of them, we're doing this in layers, right? We're taking Japheth, and we're going to go down 2 or 3 layers of his heraldry, and then we're going to go to Shem, and we'll go down 2 or 3 layers of his heraldry, and then we'll go to Ham, and we'll go down several layers of his heraldry as well. So that's the way Genesis 10 is constructed. If you tried to chart this on a big chart, if you're like, I've got a cousin who's into heraldry quite a bit. He's done a lot of our ancestors and has gone back as far as France in the year 1010, and we've got anyway. So if you tried to chart all this out like it's charted in your book here for, let's say, Kerrville, if you look at page 9 in your book, The Descendants of Kerrville, you would need you'd probably need a piece of paper as large as that wall to put all of these people on. It just doesn't make sense to do that. So, we move on. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Ripath, Togarmah. So, again, turn the page, look at page 8, and see page 7 in your booklet. Ashkenaz, which you won't have information about him on pages 5 or 6. But Ashkenaz were the son of Gomer, called the peoples who settled, the sons of Gomer came, from the sons of Gomer, came the people who settled north of Judea into what we call the Fertile Crescent. Now this idea about the Fertile Crescent is going to be on page 8. And it's probably larger than we've been led to believe. But Ashkenaz is in the upper right-hand quadrant, almost at the center, right under the Caspian Sea. And it's in green. I think that color is green.
Yes.
Okay? Now that would seem to suggest, if that's accurate, which I'd say is 50-50 that it's close to being accurate, but maybe off a few degrees one way or the other. Maybe it should be further south than it is. But you can see the thing that Ashkenaz had going for it was it's between the Caspian Sea and between the Black Sea. Therefore, when you have seas around you, when you have water, great bodies of water around you, what generally does that cause? Rick, you can say the word. It's that 4-letter word called rain. We can't seem to get it. That would seem to generate some rain, which might have helped cause this thing, create this thing called the Fertile Crescent. That's just one idea from one source that I read. There are many ideas about how all that happens. But we do know that some relatives later of Elam are going to, or Terah rather, are going to use this Fertile Crescent as they tend to do some migrating on their own. Abram is who I'm talking about in this case. Okay, so moving along. Togarmah. He comes from the son of Gomer also, and from his ancestors would be the Armenians, the modern day Armenians today. Okay, 4 and 5, 4, 5, and 6. Right?
Okay. This is chapter 10, 4, 5, and 6. The sons of Javan, Elishah, Tarshish, the Kittites, the Rodanites. From these, the maritime peoples spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. And then verse 6. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan.
Did you mean Israel instead of Egypt? Okay, yeah, and it would be. So let's take a look on page 5 and 6 again.
I see it says Israel in another version.
And we should be at, where should I be? Cush. That would be number 8 on your list. Cush is the Hebrew word for old Ethiopia. Cush will be found on your map on page 8 in the lower right-hand corner of your map. It's in orange or yellow, whatever that color is, between the words Japheth and green and Ethiopia. Cush. The Hebrew word for Ethiopia, Ethiopians are even to this day, both by themselves and by all men in Asia, called Cushites. So these men that come from this area, which is now part of Ethiopia, I think, come from Cush, would be called Cushites even to this day. Which I thought was interesting. Thousands of years later, they're still wearing that same moniker, as it were. Mizraim. In Hebrew, it's the ancient word for Egypt. Obviously, you know where Egypt is, but it's in the lower right-hand quadrant of the map on page 8, and it's right at well, it's Egypt. It's, yeah, everybody knows where Egypt is. Put is the Hebrew word for Lydia. Put can be spelled several different ways. The two ways that I came up with, and this will be number 10 on your list here on page 5. Put can be spelled P-U-T or can be spelled P-H-U-T. Your map, page 8 in the book, your map has it spelled as P-H-U-T. But it's the home of where Olivia is now. And if you need to locate it, you can find it here on this one. Canaan, number 11 on your sheet on page 6 in your book. Canaan is the Hebrew name for the region called Palestine by the Romans, which is now Israel and Jordan for the most part. There is Philistin, the ancestor of the Philistines, Palestine, and Sidon, the founder of the city of Sidon, and Heth, the patriarch of the Hittite Empire. Everybody got what we did there? Am I reading 7 through 12? Why did I get you to read that? This is horrible. I'll read it. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, oh boy, Sabtekanah. That sounds like some kind of shots you have to take. The sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Now let me help you with the land of Shinar. The land of Shinar on your map on page 8 is generally thought of, not totally agreed to be, but generally thought of in the region between or around the Tigris and the Euphrates, in that valley there, generally. You see it on your map? It's where Asher and Nimrod are shown.
Right.
Okay? So that would generally be where a lot of biblical archaeologists would plot based on information they have from digs and other things that they might have been involved in, and translations, would find the plain of Shinar. Ashkenaz, did I read Ashkenaz? I read Ashkenaz. Canaan, all right, let's look at number 12 on page 6, which would be Elam. Obviously, for time's sake, we're going to, I've skipped some locations. Elam is the ancient name for Persia. I think we all know that. King Cyrus called them Elamites. In Acts 2nd chapter, verse 9, the Jews from Persia present at Pentecost were called Elamites. Now that connects some dots right to Pentecost for us, which is a real big day for those who were followers of Jesus Christ and the establishment of the church. A lot of those men and women who came, some of the men and women who came on the day of Pentecost were Jews. And they were from Elam, and they were called Elamites by Luke. The Persians are descended from both Elam, the son of Shem, and from Madai, the son of Jacob. Since the 1930s, they've called their country Iran. What happened in the 30s to Iran? After World War I, what happened? They divided all the world up, and they decided this was going to be a country and that was going to be a country. They appointed a man who became king of Iran. And who do we generally associate as being the last monarch of Iran?
Shah.
The Shah. Yeah. He even lived in Central America for a time, didn't he? After he got kicked out of... anyway, we're digressing there. Number 13, Asher. Asher is the Hebrew name for Assyria. If you look on your map, you'll see that Asher is right above, it's in the left hand, it's in the upper right hand corner of the map. And it is just above Nimrod in purple, I guess. Everybody see?
Yeah.
See that? Okay. That's where Assyria, in part, was located. Axapharhad was the ancestor of the Chaldeans. His descendant, Eber, this is an important name to us, Eber named the Hebrew people via the line of Eber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and Abram. Who's Abram? God changes his name to what? There you go. Eber's other son, Joktan, had 13 sons that settled in Arabia. Arabia is easy to find on this map. It's in black, and today it's mostly what we would call Saudi Arabia. Lud, Roman numeral 10 on your chart on page 6. Lud is the ancestor of the Lydians in western Turkey. Their capital was Sardis. Now, what do we associate with Sardis? Anybody? How about being one of the 7 churches of Asia in Revelation 3? Again, connecting the dots, this takes us right into biblical prophecy towards the end times, and one of the 7 churches that Paul writes to and has things he likes about them.
John writes.
John writes to, boy, I got Paul in my mind today. John writes to them and to these 7 churches, and he has things that he likes about them and things that he dislikes about them. Okay. Find that in Revelation 3:1 first. And then finally, Aaron. That'll be the bottom fella on your chart. I think it'll be 16 on your chart. Aram is a Hebrew word for Syria. The Syrians call themselves Armenians. Their language is called Aramaic. The Syrians' language is called Aramaic. And please give me a little grace on that. That's sort of a wide statement. Their language, called Aramaic, before the spread of the Greek Empire, Aramaic was known as the international language. 2 Kings 18:26. On the cross, what did Jesus cry out in Aramaic? Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani? Mark 15:34. Jesus is on the cross. He was speaking Aramaic, the language of the common people at the time. Okay. I think we're down to 15 through 19. Are you there? Okay.
Cana was the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and of the Hittites, and the Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Shinites, Arvadites, Zamarites,
They live in France.
and the
He
Hamathites.
did well.
I didn't know mosquito bites, I love it. Later, the Canaanite clan scattered. Let's see. And the borders of Cana reached from Sidon towards Gerar, as far as Gaza, and then towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Adamah, and Zeboiim, as far as Lachish.
Well, that wasn't so bad. See, you just saw how this. Okay. Canaan represents Sidon. The family of Sidon, the son of Canaan, went north and settled in that area, which was also settled by Hittites and the people who became Lebanese, the Hittites. So if you're looking for, that's going to be in Turkey for the most part, that area anyway, for the Hittite kingdom. But on this map, it could be from Turkey all the way over to the Caspian Sea. But we don't know for sure. But we think that's where the Hittite kingdom was. Where many people who would know more than I do would say the Hittite kingdom was located. And the Sinite, many people believe that the Oriental, S-I-N-I-T-E, many people believe that the Oriental people descended from the Sinites. So they would have traveled a long way. Do you have 20 or do I have 20?
You do.
I have 20. Look at, watch this.
Okay.
These were the sons of Ham, according to their families, according to their languages, in their lands and their nations. Can I have some applause on that? I got through that without any effort. And the children were also born to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder. The sons of Shem were Elam, Asher, Araxaphad, Lud, and Aram. We know who Elam is. We talked about it. We talked about Asher, Lud, Aram, and Araxaphad. And we've located those on your map. 23. All right. Okay. 23. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Kether, and Nash.
Very good.
The thing that I picked out here to talk about is Uz. Who do we know of that came from Uz? Yes. Job, thank you. Job, exactly right, thank you. Job 1:1, isn't it? Job 1:1. No, right, okay, yeah. I didn't want to correct you. I appreciate it. Okay.
I got another day at home.
Yeah. I would say the thing that I found was interesting about this is a question that we probably all have in our minds about where Job lived. Job lived in Uz. Where was Uz located? What's your best guess?
Mine,
Your best guess?
my best guess is northern Egypt.
Yeah. The people that I read 5 or 6 different commentaries about Uz. That was certainly 2 out of 5 of the Bible scholars. There's also a consensus that Uz was located on the rim, but a bit beyond Ammon, Moab, and Edom. If you're interested in knowing more about that, send me your email and I'll send you some research that I did on Uz. Primarily though, Uz could be located where the east of the lower Jordan, Dead Sea area, over in that general area, because there are places in Job, several places in Job that mentions various names of individuals and where they lived, or where they came from, or who they were ancestors of. And that would be the other. There's a fellow by the name of Luke who wrote a book, The Other Side of the Jordan. And this fellow provides a lot of evidence that would lead one to believe that Uz and Job may have lived in the area that I just described to you. And that'll be contained in that research. But it's either or. It's an either or situation. Okay,
24 on.
That's you again.
That's me.
Oh, wow.
Verse 24. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah the father of Eber. 2 sons were born to Eber. One was Peleg, because in his time the earth was divided. His brother was named Joktan. Joktan was the father of Almadad, Shelphet, Azarmathet, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, perhaps, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All those were sons of Joktan. The region where they lived stretched from Mesha towards Sabir in the eastern hill country. Just outside of town. That was a joke.
We ought to really give him a hand up.
Hey, thank you for your effort.
I don't think you did a great job. I don't know how you did it. The thing that I would point out here is there's a fellow by the name of Joab mentioned here as being one of Axophod's descendants. Joab is thought by some biblical scholars as potentially being Job. Well, I think that could be far-fetched. You could consider it far-fetched, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But there is some evidence that would be the case. And if that's the case, that tells us a lot about some more information about who Job is. Because again, we know who these people are based upon who they descended from. Just like we know who we are based upon who our parents and our grandparents on down the line. Same idea. Have you got 31 years? No, I mean 31. 31. These were the sons of Shem, according to their families, according to their languages, in their lands, according to their nations. See, that wasn't so hard.
Pretty good, that.
Everybody?
So the question I have for you
No,
is,
don't do it to me. Yes, sir.
why did, Joab was Joe, why did they just not call him Joe?
I don't see how he could be Joe. The word Jobab is the Hebrew word for people. Joe is nothing even close to being that.
I always thought Joe Bob was a truck driver. That was bad, sorry. Okay, no, I said there's a lot of different opinions about that, and I would not disagree with anybody that disagreed with that. So I'm just giving you speculation about what I have read from many different resources, and trying to give you a wide, and it doesn't matter, trying to give you a wide spectrum. In summary, yes sir, you got a question back there?
If it's time for questions.
Not yet. We're saying, is it hard? Is it a hard question?
Is it a hard question?
Yeah. If it is, I've got my hand.
I get the hard ones, you can see some.
Let me read the summary here. I call this the summary, actually it's verse 32. These were the families of the sons of Noah according to their generations, in their nations, and from these nations were divided on the earth after the flood. Okay. Genesis 10.